about the fifth commandment. And now life is one of the most important, most precious of all the natural gifts that God gave us, because it does come from God and from God alone. And therefore, God is the only one who has power over life and death. Even the devil cannot kill without permission from God. God is the one who decides how long you live and the moment that you should die. To take that power into your own hands is against the fifth commandment. The fifth commandment is, thou shalt not kill. And of course, the commandment, the first thing that comes to mind when you think of that commandment is, of course, murder. Murder is the intentional taking of a life. In other words, and that is without authority. There are times when you can take a life. There are 3 situations in which you are permitted to take another's life. But murder is the intentional taking of a life without the authority to do so. So the act has to be intentional. Accidentally killing someone is not murder. As I mentioned one other time as an example in one of the other classes, if someone steps out in front of your car, maybe a child running after a ball into the street, and you have full use of all your faculties, you're not drunk, you're not under the influence of drugs or whatever, and you can't stop the car, and you kill that child, you have not committed murder. You also may kill in self-defense. That would also not be murder, but we'll get into the times when you actually can take a human life. So, mercy killing, which is something very prevalent today, it was never heard of, in a few generations past. It has existed in other generations, but it's not something that we have seen much of until, well, I'd say within the last generation or so. Mercy killing. Even if, and the reason that people use for mercy killing is, it is a mercy to kill this person. Why? Because they're in such terrible pain. Pain is not an evil thing. Pain serves a purpose. Pain can reduce your purgatory. You can offer it up and gain merit. You can reduce the purgatory of someone else. Pain can help you get into heaven. It is not an evil. The direct and intentional killing of an unborn child is murder. Now, sometimes the child dies, but that's not intentional. It's not on your part. But if you have an abortion, if you intentionally kill an unborn child, that would be murder. And it's murder that, like all murder, taking someone else's life, leaves a profound guilt behind. A guilt that you will have to bear, or the person who does it will have to bear for their whole life. The fifth commandment forbids intentionally injuring another person without just reason. So that means it also includes such things as striking someone unjustly or fighting. It's a mortal sin if the injury is unjust and it's serious. Blackening someone's eye would not be a mortal sin. Two kids get into a fight and you bloody their nose or blacken their eye, that would not be a mortal sin. But if you did serious damage to them that they couldn't see out of the eye, that they went blind in that eye, then that could be a mortal sin. Again, remember, mortal sin always means intentional. You cannot accidentally commit a mortal sin. Yes, you intended to fight that person. Did you intend to do them serious injury? No. So in that case, it might not be a mortal sin. You always should ask a priest if there's a question about something like that. So, especially kids and teenagers, you need to be careful about practical jokes that might cause serious harm. You didn't intend it at the time. You didn't intend that the joke would get out of control and somebody would get hurt. But it's not unusual for things like that to happen. So you need to be careful about those kind of practical jokes. Is there a possibility somebody could get hurt by this? And also, in order to avoid fighting, we also need to learn to control our anger and acting under the influence of anger. We'll get more into anger in a few minutes. We're right now just talking about murder and killings. All right, so sometimes some people have in their hands on a daily basis, they have to deal with life and death. These are doctors and nurses, and to some extent, people who work with ambulances, EMTs and that kind of thing. Are they guilty of death if the person in their charge dies? They would only be guilty if it was through their own fault or negligence that the person died. Their intention is to do good, to help the person. And remember, it always comes down to intention. So if the person died through their own fault, because they didn't do something that they should have done, then they are guilty. How guilty? Well, that depends on what they did or didn't do. They would also be guilty if they failed to acquire the necessary knowledge and skill. That's why doctors and nurses and EMTs are constantly going back for new courses, upgrading, learning new things, the latest innovations in the latest drugs, the latest procedures to help them in their tasks. They have to be on top of those things. They would also be guilty if they were performing some kind of experiment on the sick, or if they advised someone to commit a sinful act. A doctor or a nurse who advises a young girl to get an abortion, they would be guilty. They would be guilty of that murder as the same as if the girl did it. Even if she doesn't do it, they would be guilty to some extent for that child. If she goes ahead and does it, then they are equally guilty of the murder. They would be guilty of serious sin by advising her to do it. Again, you can participate in other people's sins. We went through this in another lesson. And if they perform forbidden operations. It used to be a doctor could not perform an abortion. And that was a forbidden operation. Now in most states it's no longer forbidden. It's only forbidden in some states at certain times of the year, but even a lot of those rules are being done away with, unfortunately. So what other forbidden operations right now? I can't think of any. Maybe an operation to change particular body parts. I think a sex change operation might be a forbidden operation. Again, those are things that a priest would probably need to advise you about. So apart from murder, the second major thing against the fifth commandment is suicide. Suicide is the deliberate, again, not accidental, the deliberate and intended taking of your own life on your own authority. The church is so strongly against suicide that she will not allow a person to be buried in the Catholic Church. You can't be buried on church property, as in a church cemetery. You can't have the ceremony in the church if you have committed suicide, unless you are mentally deficient. Again, because someone who acts, who is not in their right mind when they commit suicide, they could not make they could not make the intention properly. And if there's any doubt, the church will allow it. But the church is strongly against a suicide, again, because human life belongs to God. And when you commit suicide, you're basically committing a mortal sin and dying in the moment of committing it. What a chance is there for your eternal salvation? You're dying in the same moment you commit the mortal sin. But again, if you're mentally deficient, if you're under such strong emotional stress at the time, or something, that you're not in your right mind, you cannot make that intention, then there probably is not a mortal sin, and that's why the church permits it. People who commit acts of self-destruction like that generally are excessively proud. Again, some of our vices lead us to mortal sin. And that excessive sin of pride is also one of the things that causes people to commit suicide. They're too proud. They can't bear the humiliation. People will laugh at them when it becomes known that they've done this, that, or the other. They can't face their families. They can't face public ridicule. They can't face whatever. It's often caused by pride. And the other thing that often contributes to it is a lack of religion. They don't practice a religion. They don't practice their religion. They have no moral grounding that they can fall back on when times are bad. Remember, we went through the whole first lesson was why bad things happen to good people? Well, if they understood why bad things happen, they could be able to embrace the whole idea and realize that there's a point to this suffering. There's a point to this humiliation. There's a reason for it. So, faith and hope in God are the best safeguards against temptations to self-destruction. And unfortunately, there is a huge rise in suicide among teenagers. I remember having a girl in boarding school. She had been sent to boarding school. She didn't want to be there. And her parents thought it was the best thing for her. She wanted for her to be there. But she was so against being there that she was going to punish her parents. And she said to me, she said, "I'll just kill myself." Well, you want to punish your parents by killing yourself. Is this reasonable? You don't realize that you're also punishing yourself? You're lumping yourself together with them? And, I talked to her for a long time about it, and then I called her parents and told them to come get her. I didn't want, this girl was not thinking rationally. She was not thinking, and there was a very good chance she may just try and do something like that. And I didn't want it on my conscience. So apart from murder and suicide, what else are you obliged to do by the fifth commandment? You have to take reasonably good care of your health. Your life is important, so you have to protect your life as much as you can. What is reasonably good care of your health? Well, first of all, you should not overindulge in things. Remember, excess is a bad thing. We talked about it when we talked about vices and virtues. this temperance is the virtue, gluttony is the vice. So overindulging in anything that can hurt your body would be against this commandment. Gluttony, drinking to excess, exercising to excess, driving to excess. In other words, reckless driving or speeding. That could cause injury to yourself or to someone else. So you have to be careful about recklessness and carelessness. You have to be careful about overindulging in things that you like drugs. Maybe you have to take drugs for some reason, but you overindulge them, you become addicted to them. Again, that's going to be a problem. How about smoking? When the last two generations, they grew up on smoking, and they didn't realize it was a health hazard. But you all know that it is a health hazard. So what about it? Can you smoke? Most young people take up smoking. They know that it's bad for them. And when you start smoking, you don't even like it. I don't know anybody who liked their first cigarette. But you continue to do it. Why? Usually out of pride, self-love. Everybody else is doing it. You don't want to be ridiculed. You don't want to stand out from the crowd. So you do what they do. You drink, you smoke. It's called, human respect. It's an unnecessary habit, but is it sinful? If there's a reason for you to smoke, and if you only smoke once in a blue moon, well, it wouldn't be bad, and it wouldn't be sinful. But unfortunately, smoking is a habit that does become addictive, and it tends to increase. Well, you don't smoke one cigarette a month or one cigarette a week or even one cigarette a day. You end up smoking a pack a day or even more. And then it goes into other areas that can be just as sinful, such as wasting money, especially money that is needed for a family or for other things. Cigarettes are not inexpensive now. When I was your age, you could get a whole pack of cigarettes for 50 cents. What are they now? Several dollars? What is like 30? Like 30 cents a carton or $30 a carton or something like that? It's outrageous. 60? Wow. There are probably fewer in a carton than they were when I was a kid too. So how far do you have to go to preserve your life? You have to use ordinary means. You don't have to use extraordinary means. So if you're in the hospital and the doctor says you need an operation, do you have to have the operation? Again, it comes down to ordinary or extraordinary means. If this is a normal operation, that it's not something really special, like having your appendix out. If you don't have your appendix out, it's going to burst, you're going to die. You need to have that operation. That's ordinary means. That's a normal operation. Having a heart transplant is not a normal operation. That would be extraordinary means. If the operation were, the chances of it were, it's almost always successful, yes, then yes. And if there were no special circumstances to excuse it, then yes, to excuse you from having it, then yes, you should go ahead and do it. But if it's something totally out of the ordinary, it's some kind of experimental thing, and people are willing to do those kind of operations because, again, they want to live. But if the chances are very small, you don't have to. It doesn't mean you can't do it. You don't have to do it. So parents who are faced with the choice of whether they should permit their child to have this operation or not, need to look at those kinds of things. What are the chances of success? How is this going to leave my child in life? How is this normal or extraordinary? You know, so I have this operation for the rest of my life. This child is going to be comatose. Do you have to do that? No. That would be extraordinary. So those in authority have a little bit more responsibility than most of you would have, because they have to make decisions like that. If they have any kind of authority, they have people under them, and they are not only responsible for their own lives, but they're responsible for the lives of the people who are under them. So parents have to make decisions responsible with the responsibility of the lives of their children at stake. Employers also have to face those kind of responsibilities. They have people under them. Is the work that they do dangerous? What can they do to safeguard the lives of their employees? They have to do everything in their power to safeguard the lives of their employees. In the United States, we have an organization called, I think it's called OSHA, that goes around and examines businesses to make sure that everything is done safely. You know, if you're in construction, that your people are wearing hard hats in certain areas, that the equipment is put away, that all the electric works, that there are all kinds of alarms and safeguards, and the businesses have to comply with that. But even if there was not a company like a government organization like OSHA, employers have that obligation, especially in dangerous jobs like mining and construction, to help their people live. And you, as the employee, have an obligation to fulfill all those safeguards. You know the rule when you have to wear a hard hat, you better be wearing it. You know you're supposed to rig yourself up with a certain apparatus in case you fall off the top of the 20th floor. You better be using it. So are you allowed to work in dangerous jobs? Yes. Because the working in the dangerous job you're not doing it because you're trying to kill yourself. Again, the intention. You're doing it to provide livelihood for your family. Somebody has to do it. And so again, it comes down to the intention. You're not doing it because you like to live on the edge of, and flirt with death. No, you're doing it to provide a paycheck for your family. You can also expose your life to danger for the sake of other people, because their lives are important. You're allowed to, risk your life for them. Policemen, firemen, they do it on a daily basis. Doctors, nurses, priests. For the life, for the safety, for the salvation of someone else, they're allowed to risk their lives. I remember my novice mistress, she said that when she was a little girl, one of the priests in the parish was badly scarred. And none of the kids ever liked to go to confession to him because he was so scarred, he was ugly. And, kids are kind of sensitive, things like that. Anyway, one day, there was nobody else to go to confession to, so she went to confession to him. She had stolen some, for Easter, her mother got Easter eggs and put them up on, these chocolate-covered Easter eggs in boxes, and put them up on the mantle in the living room. Anyway, one day, when she got a chair and she got up on and ate one of the Easter eggs, put the box back. Yeah, and she enjoyed it so much she went down the line and ate the next one and the next, putting all the boxes back. Anyway, of course her mother found out, and of course she was punished. But the thing was, she had stolen. And her conscience bothered her so badly. She was a thief. She'd stolen. And she didn't want to go to, she didn't want to go to confession because she would have to tell the priest she stole. But finally, she let all the other kids go in front of her until finally there was nobody else but her. And the only one she could go to was this priest, this scarred priest. So she went to him. And she went and she said, he was the sweetest, kindest priest. He said, now honey, I want you to understand, you told it in confession, it's finished, it's gone, never think about it again. Because she was crying, bawling all over in the confessional, oh, Father, I stole, and then she had to explain to her what she did. So afterwards, she found out how it was that she said she went to him regularly after that. She loved him, he became her confessor. But she found out why he was so badly scarred. In Philadelphia, the oil works, there had been an explosion, and a man had gotten trapped in the part of the building had fallen down, and the man was caught under a girder, and they couldn't get him out. But the man was still alive, but they couldn't get him out, and he was going to die. And this priest had gone into the fire, into that building that's ready to collapse, to hear the man's last confession. And he had been burned in the fire. That's why he was so scarred. You're allowed to risk your life for the sake of someone else, and priests will do it for the life of a soul, for a soul, to save someone from mortal who's dying, who may be in mortal sin. You're also forbidden to mutilate your body. Now this comes up a lot more recently than I've ever seen it in the past. I mean, twice. I've only been in Louisiana for a year now, and already twice I've been asked whether or not it's all right to get tattoos. The question also comes up about piercings. Well, is that considered mutilating your body? The church doesn't consider pierced ears, girls, mutilation of the body. In most Catholic countries, which includes all the Latin American countries, Italy, Spain, South America, Mexico, a baby girl's ears are pierced at birth. The first studs are put in when she's born. So that's not considered a major mutilation of your body, and it's permitted. Other kind of piercings, those are kind of frowned upon. First of all, most of those kind of piercings, the cultures that, the pierced ears on a baby in Spanish country, that's part of the culture. The cultures that use other kind of piercings through the nose, through the lips, through the other parts of the body, those tend to be pagan countries, and they're part of a pagan culture. So what you're doing in imitating those kind of piercings is you're imitating a pagan culture. So if you want to get those kind of piercings, I would ask a priest, but I'm pretty sure that he would probably say no. That whether it would be a mortal or venial sin, again, that's something you would have to ask him. And also how many piercings you're going to get and where they're going to be also probably would be part of it. Tattoos, again, I think along the same lines as the pierced ear thing. If you're looking at a tiny little tattoo on some insignificant part of your body that nobody sees, again, probably there's probably nothing wrong with that. But if you plan to tattoo major parts of your body that are going to be exposed, then yes, you're talking about mutilation. And also, think about it reasonably. Tattoos are a permanent thing. The piercings you can take out and it'll close up, you know. But you're talking about something that's permanent. You're going to have the rest of your life. And yes, it can be taken away. It's both painful to put on and painful to take off. And as often doesn't come off entirely. Second thing you need to look at is, since it is going to be permanent and on your body for the rest of your life, your body right now might be young and healthy, but it's going to sag and get wrinkled and distorted in life. And so are those tattoos. They won't look the same. And also, you know, if you have tattoos down major part, your arms and and your legs, think of some of the fashions that you might be wearing and how that might affect how you look in that dress or that shirt or that outfit. You're going to be really limiting your style in the coming years. So those are all things you need to think about on a reasonable basis before you even, you know, yeah, it looks cute right now, and if you really want to try, somebody suggested, I think it was a good idea. They said you should get maybe like a pair of leggings or something and paint it up the way you want the tattoo to be, and then wear it for a while and see how you look in it for a long term. You know, go for a week or two, wearing the same markings all over your legs or your arms or whatever, and see how long you can live with it. Sports. There are some sports that do give bodily injury. When I'm thinking about like football and boxing, but there's a lot of other sports too that you can be injured in doing, you know, like race car driving or whatever, or soccer, even soccer or basketball, you can be injured. But again, that's not the intention. The intention of the sport is to go out there and get hurt. So, and the intention is what the church always looks at. So any bodily injury is always accidental to it. It wasn't the goal. So yes, you may play in different kinds of sports. So when is killing not wrong? There are only 3 times when killing is not wrong. One is self-defense, either defending yourself or someone else, your family, or your property. Those are the only time. The self-defense is the only time, and defending the property means it's a significant piece of property. It's not, you know, you took my rabbit's foot, so you kill them? No. It's a major thing. Wounding is preferable to killing. If you can wound the person instead of killing them, that's what you should do, instead of, you know, going for blood right away. A woman has a right to protect her honor, and a man has the right to protect his home. So those are cases when, yes, you may, if necessary, take someone else's life. But again, it's preferable to try not to do it. The other 2 situations involve the state. The state, just as an individual has the right to defend themselves, the state has the right to defend itself, internally and externally. Internally, from those who live within it, who are trying to take the lives of other people, or who are living in, taking part in such criminal actions that they endanger the lives of other people. And they have lost the right to live in society. The state may execute them. Again, the state has the authority to do that, And the state never does that until after their guilt has been proven. Lynching, that is when a mob gets together and takes the law into their own hands, is a mortal sin. Taking part in a lynching is a mortal sin. Lynching is mob rule. There is no justice in it. A state also has the right to protect itself externally. That means protect its borders. So a country may call men into military service and send those men to kill those who are attacking it. A state has the right to defend itself, and the people who live within the state have the right to defend their country, their families, their nation from others who are attacking it. And the state also has the right, just as you have the right to defend other people who are being attacked, the state has the right to go to the defense of other nations that are being attacked in a just war. And it comes down to a just war. That means the reasons for the war are just. And we'll get into that some other time, what constitutes a just war. Those are the only three situations when you are permitted to take the life of someone else. The Catholic Church has always been the major defender of the life of human beings. The Catholic Church has always stood as the bulwark against abortion and against mercy killings. Why? Because the Catholic Church understands that God is the one who gives life and God only can take it. The state and other people who feel that they have the right to decide when life can be taken, apart from those three instances already mentioned, states who try to and do pass laws allowing abortion, allowing mercy killing, they're taking an authority that they don't have, authority that belongs to God, and that's why the church opposes them. If the church, not if the church, but if the state were allowed to say, all right, so it's all right to kill a baby that is an unborn baby because the family is too large. There's too many people in the family, and the money that the family earns would be better spent on the children that they already have. China limits the number of children a family can have to 1 if it's a boy, and 2 if the first child is a girl. That's the limit. You're not allowed to have more than that. So what happens to the other children? Well, that's what abortions are for. If the state is allowed to say, yes, you can't have a child because there's already too many children in the family, what's to stop the church from saying, okay, there's already 2 children in this family, we're going to kill all the rest of you. There's too many. This child is feeble-minded. This child that's another excuse why when they examine the mother before the baby is born, they say, well, this child has Down syndrome. It might be a good idea to abort this child. If the state allows you to abort a child because it doesn't have the mental capacity that a normal child would, was to say that this church can't come in and say, well, we're only going to allow children who have high IQs. If you're not an A student, we'll exterminate you. don't think it's an unreasonable thing. It has been done. I'm thinking about Nazi Germany, Russia under Stalin, China under Mao Zedong. These are countries without religion, and they killed their populations, members of their populations. The Nazis killed you because you were Jewish or you were Catholic. I don't think people realize that the Jews weren't the only ones who were persecuted during Hitler's regime. Catholics died. My superior's brother died in a Nazi concentration camp because he was a Catholic educator in a college. All the priests were put into concentration camps under Hitler. Hitler had children who had any kind of mental deficiency exterminated. He had the elderly and people who had any kind of disease or would cause any kind of problem for the state, expense for the state, exterminated. They weren't useful to the state, so we don't need them. We killed them. And that's what happens when you allow the state to start determining who can live and who can die for ridiculous reasons. And that's why the Catholic Church has always stood against the state for the defense of life. If you can kill an unborn baby who is innocent of anything, what can you do to the rest of us who are guilty of quite a few things? The mother who loses her life because of her child has been given a chance for true Christian virtue. It very seldom comes down now. In my mother's generation, that was not the case. Often women died in childbirth. It came down to the choice of who's going to live, the mother or the baby. But now with cesareans operations, that's very seldom the case. But even still, if it comes down to that, the child is the more important than the mother. The mother has lived her life. She's had a chance. She brought that child into existence. She's responsible for it. The child comes first. And if she dies in the course of the giving birth, that was God's will. And she did what she was supposed to do. And again, with mercy killings, pain is not an evil. And the person who bears it patiently can save souls. And also, our efforts to find remedies for the suffering people benefits all of mankind. And if we just put them to death, there would be no effort to find remedies for other illnesses. And for Americans especially should be very conscious of a defense of life. It was written in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Self-evident means that it doesn't have to be proven. Everybody knows it. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Those are rights that you cannot take away. And among these are life. First one, life. Everyone has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The fifth commandment also obliges men, of course, to live together in peace. Because if there's war, people are getting killed. If there's fighting and quarreling, that can end up in murder and loss of life. So fifth commandment requires that we live together in peace. And as a result, even though we may never be guilty of suicide or murder, there are other things less serious that the fifth commandment forbids. Anger, hatred, revenge, fighting, and quarreling. And one more that we'll get to finally. Anger, hatred, revenge, fighting, and quarreling. Now, anger can be either good or evil, depending upon the intention, again. There is such a thing as just anger. Just anger is not sinful. Our Lord demonstrated that when he drove the sellers out of the temple. His anger was directed at them because they were abusing his Father's house. If people were in this church selling and carrying on or having a party, and you would be rightfully angry to come in and drive them out because they're being disrespectful to the Blessed Sacrament. Well, that was the way our Lord was acting in the temple. The sellers were being disrespectful to his Father's house. That's right. That's righteous anger. Most of the time, the anger, though, is sinful because it's based on self-love. We're angry because our pride was hurt. Most of the time when you're angry with someone else, you should really be angry with yourself. You did something. They didn't do it. You did something. If you really examine your anger, you should see that your anger directed toward them should really be directed toward yourself. You're the one who did something wrong. Most of the time, our anger is caused because of pride or attachment to worldly goods, the things that we have. He dented my car. You're too attached to your car. Yes, I can understand why it might upset you that you have a dent in your car, but to be really angry, screaming at him and yelling at him, that's not the way you should be behaving. You should be explaining to him why you broke my car. What are you going to do about it? You have insurance? So most of the time, anger is caused because of self-love or over an injury that usually it's an imaginary injury. We think the person intended something that they didn't intend. He's making fun of me. Probably not. Anger, as I talked about when we talked about vice and virtue, is a vice, and again, like most vices, is a habit, and therefore is going to be hard to overcome. And just go back and look at that video, and I gave you ways to help you to overcome vice. It will help with anger as well. First of all, you need to pray to overcome your emotions are just too volatile, and you need to learn to control your emotions. You have to, first of all, admit that you have the problem, and then work on getting rid of it. And it'll be slow. Because you have to develop the virtues of humility and meekness. Hatred. Hatred often follows wherever anger goes. We get angry with someone, and that usually causes us to end up hating them. Hatred is, if it's allowed to grow, can become can become a mortal sin. Usually at first it's not. It's only over time when the hatred becomes really deep-seated that we want vengeance, that we really want harm to happen to the person, that it becomes a mortal sin. Envy is sorrow or sadness at the good fortune of another. You're sad because they're happy, that something good happened to them. Envy is the sister of hatred and pride. A person who is proud ends up being envious. A person who hates ends up being envious. Without those two, envy doesn't exist. And usually, again, hatred, envy, anger, usually end up with a desire for revenge. Revenge is an inordinate desire to injure someone because we're angry with them. And it doesn't matter whether it's a real injury or an imaginary one. We want revenge. If the case is just, then there's ways that you can get, I wouldn't say get even, but you can have the wrongdoer punished. You take it to court, and the courts decide. That's not revenge, that's justice. Revenge is when you take it upon yourself. Now, quarreling. When anger, hatred, envy, or revenge do not culminate in evil actions, they invariably betray themselves by spiteful and insulting words. It's the words that start things out. You know, you call somebody a name, and they call it back to you, then you end up hitting each other, and then pretty soon, you know, there's blood, you bloodied somebody's nose, you're thinking about ways you're going to get even, and mom wants to know why you hit. He did it first. No, nobody knows what. It all started out with a few words, you know. Words. Out of the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaketh. What you say, what comes out of you has already been in your mind. Be careful. Be careful about what you say. First of all, you can't take back anything that you said. Now, when you're kids, you say things, and then afterwards say, but I didn't mean it. You meant it. You said it, so you meant it. You need to learn to control your mouth now. St. James said that he who offends not in word, the same is a perfect man. You want to be perfect, you have to learn to control your tongue. It all starts with words. I spent how many classes on words? The importance of a word. Now, those are some things that offend the fifth commandment. But there's one more thing. The church, which is more important in the eyes of God and the church? The soul or the body? The soul. And the soul, the life of the soul is more important than the life of the body. And the life of the body is more important than the body. That's why if you can mutilate the body, if it means that the life will exist, the life of the body is more important than the body. If you have to amputate a leg to save your life, you can do it. Because the life is more important than the body itself. But the life of the soul is more important than the life of the body. The last part of the fifth commandment, the way you can offend against the fifth commandment, is called scandal. Scandal is a sinful word, deed, or omission that disposes others to sin or lessens the respect for God. And it isn't necessary that others actually commit the sin, but only that there be influence toward it. Scandal is when you do something that your example, either by word, action, or not doing something, causes others to think that it's okay or good or that they should do something sinful. A parent who does not go to church on Sunday is giving bad example to their children. He's scandalizing them. And they begin to think that it's okay not to go to church on Sunday. How can you offend? Well, first of all, the gravity of the sin, whether it's going to be mortal or venial, will depend entirely upon what you're tempting the other person to do. If the sin that they're being tempted to do is a mortal sin, then the gravity of the sin is mortal. If it's venial, then it's, if you're trying to get your brother or sister to say a bad word, that would probably be venial. But if you're trying to get them not to go to church on Sunday, that would be mortal. So how does this work? Word, deed, or omission. By word, blasphemy would be scandal. Because when you use a bad word, you're giving others an example that they can use that bad word, that they can use God's name in vain. Praising somebody who is doing wrong. You see somebody committing sin, and you say, "Oh, gee, that's so great." That's giving scandal. Threatening others to commit sin or daring them to do something that's sinful. Again, that's would be by word. By deed, again, anytime you do something, you're setting a bad example. And there's thousands of ways that can be done. Through your conduct. Professors in colleges do it to colleges students all the time, giving them a bad example or by word, by explaining to them that this is all right, this should be wrong, this is wrong, this is right, there is no such thing as religion, this is all, it's all superstition. It's done all the time in colleges by professors. Omission. When parents or those in authority omit their religious duties, and their children know it, or those under them understand it. Not going to church on Sunday, your children see you not going to church on Sunday. Neglecting the education of children would be scandal. Failing to correct their faults. Your parents would be negligible. They would be, negligible isn't the right word, negligent. They would be negligent if they didn't punish you when you do something wrong. They're obliged to. It would be scandalous if they didn't. Why? Because your brothers and sisters see you doing it and getting away with it, which would cause them to do it. When you commit scandal, you are obliged to repair the damage as much as you can. Unfortunately, it is almost impossible to repair the damage. Someone has seen you do something wrong. Now they think that it's all right to do that. And you might tell them, oh, I was just joking, I didn't really mean that. They're not going to believe you. They've already got it in their mind, it's okay. Maybe somebody's just, after you to try and they won't believe you. You've already made an impression on their mind, and even if you say that it's wrong, that you didn't intend it, they still now have it in their mind, and there's no way to get it out. Our Lord was so against scandal. I know I put the quote here somewhere. It would be the one about the millstone. Whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it were better for him that a great millstone were hung around his neck. You all know what a millstone is, don't you? Those great big rocks. They're about, even a small one, which they used to sharpen knives on or grind small amounts of wheat and flour. They're usually about at least 4 to 6 inches wide and usually a couple of feet wide, with a hole in the middle where they would be on a shaft so they could turn. Those were small ones. He says a great one, the kind used in the great big mill that they used a water wheel to turn. The kind that are like 6 feet tall and 3 feet wide. It would be better that one of those were hung around your neck and you were shoved off into the ocean to drown. It would be better that a great millstone were hung around his neck and he'd be drowned in the depths of the sea. Better that than to give scandal to a child. Because once you take a child's innocence, you cannot replace it. And the innocence of a child was so important to our Lord. Your own innocence, safeguard it for as long as you can. That baptismal innocence, your baptismal innocence. I told you, you can go through your whole life and never commit a mortal sin. That's your baptismal innocence. You lose it when you commit the mortal sin. You can go through your whole life without committing mortal sin. It's not an impossibility. It's very possible. Remember what is required to make a sin mortal. It has to be big. You have to know it. And you have to say, I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway. You have to give full consent. You have to intend it. That's a big thing, intending to commit the mortal sin. If you never intend to commit a mortal sin, you will never commit a mortal sin. So you might think next time we're going to talk about the 6th commandment. You're wrong. Next time we're going to talk about the 7th. We're going to skip the 6th and come back to it later when we hit the 9th. Next week it'll probably be the 7th and 10th, maybe just the 7th. It depends upon how much. It's probably going to cover more than 1 week. All right, any questions on the 5th commandment? No more quarreling, huh? I know that's hard. Saying things, control your tongue. Talking back. Calling names. It all starts there. It all starts there.